making Lou Bryson laugh. I'm here with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, Lou Bryson, and a special guest this week, Peggy Noe Stevens, who I will let the gang introduce you to in just a moment. First, I'm Will Hookingo from Zavvy.co, and real quickly, before I turn things over to your hosts, just want to point out a couple of ways that you can interact with them throughout the broadcast if this is your first time, if you haven't joined us before. To your right, there is a chat box where you can say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from. I see we already have some folks coming in from Los Gatos, California, Lake Tahoe, San Rafael. Got a lot of Californians here today. That's cool to see.
The cats?
And yeah, if you have a question at any point during the broadcast, you'll see a little button at the bottom middle part of your screen that says "Ask a Question." That's the best place to put it. I'll be keeping an eye on those and relaying them to our hosts. Hi from Amsterdam. All right, we're going international now.
Nice. Hi, Amsterdam.
I think that's Niels from the ENH here. All right. So with that said, also there's a share button at the top if you want to invite your friends to join us. That's a great, easy way to do that. But with all that said, Marty, Lou, Liz, I'll turn things over to y'all now.
Yeah, thanks, Will. You're the bestest. Well, I think everybody's here for one reason only. Is to meet the first lady of Kentucky bourbon. I'm giving you that title, Peg. Now, I don't know if you already had it, but I'm re-giving it to you.
Take it and run with it.
Peggy Noe Stevens, let's see. Let's count it off. Author. Hall of Fame inductee, Bourbon Hall of Fame, World Whisky Hall of Fame. I did some heavy research yesterday, which basically required an email. That you are the only woman to be in both Hall of Fames. Very unique. Your crown is on the way. It's really just a broken bottle, but with the shards mixing up. You're an author, and you are the co-founder. Well, you're co-author of this beautiful book. Which fork do I use with my bourbon? This just came out about a month and a half ago. Peg?
Yeah, it was actually a soft opening. I'm trying to think about end of March, right when the shutdown hit the entertaining book launch.
Good timing. Goddamn.
Yeah.
Lou can attest to that as well, and Davin, and it's like the writer gods were not smiling on you guys,
right?
No.
But Peg, you are also the co-founder of Bourbon Women, which is a national group. I mean, you have chapters in at least 10 cities. Yeah.
Can you believe it? And we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary next year.
Right, and you have a big symposium coming up, but is now going virtual.
That's right.
So let's get into this.
You forgot one thing about me that everybody should know. I'm a very good dancer.
Oh, yes.
I just for the record, aside from all the bourbon.
Let me go through my files.
I think people need to know that about me.
You're going to have to find your
particular style or genre, or just...
Yeah, I kind of like Motown. I kind of like, hard rock. I like all genres.
See, that's not what I thought you were going to go for. When I think of Peggy Noe Stevens, I think of this Southern. Now, I don't want Belle. Belle doesn't sound right, but it's, a Southern lady, and I was imagining like the Tennessee Waltz or very like Betty Davis in this.
You see where stereotyping gets you?
It sure does. Southern wise, I have big hair, but certainly not the other side of the hoop skirt thing. Right.
And Liz is very northern because her hair is very not big. Does that have something to do with what is that, longitude? Or is that latitude? That's latitude? Longitude? Anyways.
Latitude.
Yeah, latitude. So, Peg, tell us about the book. I'm very intrigued. One, I love all your I've sat through a couple of your presentations, and they're fantastic.
Thank you.
And so all about entertaining, but it's entertaining with whiskey.
Right.
Fantastic. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I started writing this book, and Lou, you might understand this about me. I started writing the book about 10 years ago. And because I just felt that everything that I was teaching in business, with bourbon tastings and hospitality and all the event planning that I've done over the years, it seemed that people would come up to me after a seminar and say, gosh, how do you do this? How can I do this in my home? Or recreate this tasting in my home. And so probably about 10 years ago, I started to write a couple chapters, and, life got full, and I started traveling so much with my company that I'd started, and I kind of put it aside. And then over the course of time, Susan Riegler and I became very dear friends, and she's written several books. And I was complaining actually to her that, gosh, I really have wanted to do this book about bourbon entertaining for so long and share everything that I know about, how to do a tasting and food pairings and, inviting your friends over and cocktails. And I can't get it off the ground. Do you think you could help me? And so she said, yeah, I'll help you, kind of stay disciplined and challenge you. And, and then I thought, well, you know what, Susan, you and I have such different personalities, but at the same time, we have the common denominator that we love to teach, and we love to teach whiskey, and we love to entertain. And we have bourbon women, that we're so passionate about. So why don't we co-author together, and we'll write this book? And we had a ball, because we have very different styles, but at the same time, it all kind of came together. If you read the chapters, sometimes people can say, well, I can tell what you wrote and I can tell what Susan wrote, which is fun to me for them to say that. And we really got it done probably in about a year to actually write it and decide what we were doing. And then all the photography in it is original. We did photo shoots together, and just couldn't be prouder, because it's just very different. It's a culmination of saying you don't have to be an expert to entertain with bourbon. And the which fork do I use with my bourbon is kind of a play on words, because I'm actually a certified etiquette consultant. I received that along the way in my career. And so many people would say, what's the proper way to hold a Glencairn glass? What's the proper way to do this? What's the proper way to do that? And the beauty of the bourbon industry is that we're not hung up on, get it right, or, you're not doing it right. It's all about approachability. And so it's kind of a play on words to say, we're just going to teach you the tricks of the trade, things that we've learned through tradition, instead of saying you have to do it like this. So that's where which fork do I use with my bourbon comes in.
Which, by the way, there should be a link down below. So if you don't have the book yet, go ahead and check that out. Follow the link.
Not at Lou. It's not at Lou, but below Lou.
Keep going below. Keep going further down.
And we had actually a first question as well from Trevor. So speaking of entertaining, this is relating to your dancing comment, actually. So from Trevor, does the bourbon help with the dancing?
It absolutely does. It's like lubrication. It's like lubrication for your joints. Also,
warm up.
There's something I call liquid courage.
Yeah.
And it gets you on the dance floor.
It also gets you in trouble.
Yes.
Well, that's if you have too much liquid courage, but that little bit.
A little bit of liquid courage goes a long way.
Yeah, but whoever heard of getting in trouble with too much courage? I have too much courage. No, not too much. You'll get in trouble. A liquid courage, yes, it'll get you in trouble.
Yeah.
And by the way, Heather from DC seconds my motion to call you the first lady of bourbon.
Oh, so nice.
It's been seconded. Put that in the notes.
I was going to say that's man then. Yeah. Thank you, Heather.
What about Bourbon Women? Now, how'd that come about? You formed that with Susan, correct?
Well, actually, what happened was when I started my company, and I had left a big spirits company that I'd worked for 17 years, and I was in marketing, and I would always bring up how women are the other half of the population. And I know so many women, of course, being a Kentuckian, that absolutely are so loyal to bourbon and really passionate about it, and especially the culture that surrounds it. And so I just never could get marketing money to support it because it wasn't a priority, because, it was a very male dominated target market, which was fine because, money only goes so far. So when I started my own company, I decided I'd start my own damn thing. And we surveyed through focus groups throughout Kentucky, a bunch of women, and said, hey, if we could deliver education, information, if there was a group of women that you could have cocktails with and talk about different bourbons and why we drink them, et cetera, would you be interested? And it was a resounding yes from the focus groups. And so I pulled together what I call kind of my board of directors, women who I really respect, not only in the industry, but outside of the industry. And we formed the Bourbon Women Association back in 2011. And it was at the governor's mansion that it was the inaugural night. I don't know if you were there, Marty. Were you there that night?
No.
Okay. And so that's when it officially launched. And we had like 75 women. We were so proud, right? And now we have thousands of women across the United States, over 10 cities that we're in. And these women, after we do, so many events in the different cities, et cetera, they're so passionate about it and so proud to be part of it. And we're education based. And so even, Lou, we've invited Lou to come and talk about the master class. And, we really try to celebrate, women in the industry and outside of the industry. So the symposium that you mentioned earlier, we call it the Symposium. That's about 7 years old, and 300 women came last year for an entire weekend in Louisville, Kentucky, and we went on excursions. We did
300.
What's that?
Did you say 300?
Over 300 women.
Wow.
From 26 different states came in. And we did, like I said, excursions, workshops. Fawn Weaver was our keynote speaker. It was amazing. We did private dinners at the distillery, like Maker's Mark had a private dinner for us on Friday night. It was just, it's something that I can't even describe because the energy is so great. But this year, of course, under our circumstances, we're going to do a virtual conference, and it's going to be the weekend of August the 23rd. So look for more details on bourbonwomen.org if you'd like to help support us. It's our big fundraiser. So that's what we're doing this year, and we got a hell of a lineup. So I'm really proud of that.
So I'm sorry, Liz or Lou? I don't want to ask all the questions.
What?
Do you have a question?
Oh, no, I'm fine.
No? Lizard?
You touched on it a little bit. And in terms of the membership and who's a part of Bourbon Woman, you mentioned that it's not just industry, but also outside of the industry. What is that makeup? Is it mostly around just imbibing and enjoying bourbon, or in terms of the education platforms?
Sure.
I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's really a consumer-based organization. We just happen to have a lot of industry people also join because they want to, meet and learn about the consumers, female consumer. So some of the education that we've had, you all recently had Monica Wolf, I think, on your set.
Yes.
Monica Wolf and her partner did a seminar on nosing for faults, teaching how to judge a whiskey, and defects in the whiskey, which was extremely interesting to so many. Then we do more lighthearted, like a food pairing that we would host and have. We go to different distilleries and let the distilleries take people on tour behind the scenes. We've had Joyce Nethery, for example, from Jephthah Creed talk about, the dissection of corn and what it brings to whiskey. So we go very scientific, we go very playful, we go very enjoyable. And it's really just such a great synergy of information that everybody kind of enjoys. And ironically, more and more men are joining Bourbon Women. Because
that was going to be my next question.
Does that defeat the purpose? What is that one you have to
Does
change
it?
the name to Bourbon People?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's funny
You
because
bourbon
it
person?
started actually with our conference because a couple of women, they bring their boyfriend or their husband, and they had so much fun. The guys had so much fun that they started coming every year. And finally, I walked up to a couple of them and I'm saying, okay, this is like the third year I've seen you here. Why do you keep coming to this conference? He goes, you all do it right. You all do great events. You all get
Nice.
access. You all get access like nobody else does. And we had to laugh at that. So more and more men are coming. But what's been so wonderful is what we also have noticed, especially about the symposium. It's become almost like this rite of passage. We have mothers bringing their newly 21-year-olds daughters to symposium. We have aunts who are bringing their nieces to symposium. We have daughters bringing their 86-year-old mother to the symposium. We have girls' weekends. A lot of girls' weekends. This is where they meet now, is at symposium from around the country. So it's become this really annual event to bring people together.
Well, when I used to do seminars for Johnny Walker, I would get a lot of women show up. And it'd be maybe about 45% women, 55% guys. And, afterwards I greet everybody as they left. And I said, oh, ladies, it's great for you to come. Thanks. And so are you big whiskey drinkers in general? And they go, well, no. We used to go to wine tastings to meet guys. Most of the guys were gay. So we figured we go to Scotch tastings and the guys would be straight. So I'm thinking a lot of those guys are coming to whiskey events because you find a woman who drinks whiskey. That's like that's a marriage made in heaven right there.
Well, it is. And I'll tell you, do I have time for a funny story?
Yeah,
really connected. I'm a master taster. And when I worked for the spirits company, I would travel all over and conduct tastings. And it was always, predominantly men. There'd always be a couple women in the back of the room, and they'd never ask questions until the end of the seminar. And then they'd walk up to me and ask questions. So I always noticed that they were kind of gun shy, about participating. But then it was an epiphany. I went to Kiowa Island, and there was a big women's weekend, and it was just random consumers, but I was part of the entertainment. They brought me in to teach women how to do a bourbon tasting. And this group was absolutely not bourbon drinkers. Okay. I probably had 150 women in this seminar. And so I said, well, raise your hand if you drink, bourbon, maybe 5. And then I said, well, raise your hand if you drink margaritas. Well, they all were like, oh, margaritas. I said, well, raise your hand if you drink shots of tequila. And then, half that, would raise their hand. And I'm like, I'm going to show you how to appreciate bourbon, because if you're willing to do a shot of tequila, or drink a margarita, I'm going to have you taste whiskey, and I'm going to have you taste a cocktail with whiskey, and you will never go back to margaritas. You will never go back. And by the end of the night, at the dinner that we had after all the bourbon tasting, they were all doing the can singing New York, New York. And they loved it.
With courage.
I said, who loves bourbon? And they were all like,
there's a country song.
There was a lesson in that. It's not that women wouldn't drink bourbon. It's that we never taught them. We never showed them how to appreciate it. We never talked about it because it was always looked at as their father's drink.
But which is weird. I mean, when I was a kid, all my aunts and uncles drank whiskey. I mean, all the women, mainly Scotch, and the men drank bourbon. I remember Uncle Chuck was a big Manhattan fan, but my Aunt Rita, man, she always had a glass of, I think she drank Cutty Sark on the rocks. That was her drink.
There's a Canadian whiskey in my family.
There was a whole generation, I think, prior to us. And then, but you know what, too? I was a bartender in the 90s. Vodka was pushed on everybody. And then if you go into college towns, it's cotton candy and birthday cake flavored vodka.
Right.
Yeah. It's really tough to move someone off of that. It's like taking someone from candy and trying to introduce them into something like
Totally different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what was so interesting to me, because a woman was willing to do a shot of tequila, and handle that, but they wouldn't, take the wonderful complexity, and sweetness of whiskey. And so that's what we were trying to teach them, is that it's a really wonderful, complex, you can have it in a cocktail. And that was kind of the entry into it.
Well, and it was a bit, I think there's also with tequila and even vodka, unless it was mixed with something. College kids in general, they really should be a class on how to drink, because they just all they do. Well, because all they do is do shots. And I used to experience this doing staff trainings. If it was a young staff fresh out of college, you give them a sample and you'd even tell them, all right, now take a little sip. And it was just, and I was like, what did I just say? I have to hit them a few times. Can't hit them anymore.
See, my opinion, I think a lot of that is because it's the 21 drinking age. I think because you are drinking illicitly, you have a tendency to just, someone may walk in and interrupt me at any time, so boom. I don't know, it's just a theory. I've thought about it.